You just haven't hit the record button yet.
Oops.
Hello, everyone. Starting in just a second. All right, here we go. Welcome to TORAH Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with the brand new mini-series, Controversial Issues, with Rabbi Chaim Coffman from the Holy of the Holy Lands. Rabbi, it's welcome to the show. Good to see you again. See, I knew I forgot to do something again. Where did it go now? Yep. Yeah, it's okay. We're going to talk anyway. We're just going to act like everything is normal. I lost one of my camera shots. That's okay. I know where to pull you up at. I'll pull you up right here for now. Wow. Goodness gracious. Oh, that's why. I blocked it off. That spontaneous recording I did last night, I shut off the desktop presenter. Hang on just a second. Let me find it again. Oh, it's gone completely. I'm going to have to add it. There it is. Boom. Ah, there you are. All right, cool. Okay, so now I just need to... Shalom, Rabbi. It's so good to see you. It's been a long, hurtful road trying to get you back in here. Man.
It's because you're afraid to have your studio blown up. I understand. It's,
hey, you would too.
No personal offense taken. Just ruining my mornings. No problem.
Oh my gosh. So how have you been these days? How's your beyond the Orthodox conversion to Judaism? This whole, I know you had a lot of classes started last year with people, Noahides seeking conversion and just dealing with Noahides in general. And so that's, what the heck did I just do that for? So tell us a little bit about what's been going on lately in your end of the world with all the stuff that you've got going on.
Well, over here, we're busy giving classes online. People want to convert. People don't want to convert. People want to stay. Noahides, I also incorporated a class has nothing to do with Noahides or converts. And we're doing a class on, it's called Intro to Kabbalah. It's basically a class based on the book Derech Hashem, The Way of God by the Ramchal, by Rabbi Chaim Coffman. And it speaks about everything you have to know about what's going on in this world, why God created the world, what the purpose of man, the evil inclination versus the good inclination, divine providence, the purpose of the nations, why do people have to convert, prophecy. I mean, it's a catch-all, class for Jews and non-Jews, whoever wants to come. Even though I called it Intro to Kabbalah, I don't turn people into frogs, at least not on purpose. So we, it's a good interactive type of class in, philosophy, which, I think is important that people understand where they came from, what their purpose in life is, whether they convert or not. So it's nice topics that we, we've definitely gone through over the last number of months, and conversion is just sort of exploding at the moment. I got people from all over the world contacting me on a daily basis and, interested in what to do and, how to go about it. I'm actually in the process now of making an 8-part series on someone comes out of idolatry, exactly, what's their next move? Do they convert? Do they become a Noahide? And presenting them with information, that they'll need in order to make a concrete decision either one way or the other. So that is that's definitely in the process that hopefully in the next few months I hope to get it up there, make some videos and etc. So at least people won't be wallowing, so to speak, and not know what to do. So we're gonna present them with a lot of information, and hopefully once they see the information they'll be able to make a concrete decision. Exactly what they want to do and how to actually go about it.
Got it. Well, I'll tell you what, there is definitely a lot of people who are curious about it, and then there's a lot of room and reason to introduce new shows and topics. Just the Noahide path in general. There's a lot of people curious on what to do and how to actually walk out their their life pleasing to Hashem. But as a Noahide, they don't want to convert.
Right.
Some do want to convert, so they're kind of curious. Hey, can I keep more of the laws because I'm going to be converting one day? I mean, there's a lot of good questions out there. So,
Can I still eat shrimp? You say, yes, you can still eat shrimp. Says, all right, I'm interested. I don't want to convert.
It's interesting. That's definitely a question that comes up. Is it forbidden for a Noahide to eat like shrimp and all shellfish and pork and things like that? And I was like, no.
I had somebody that was interested in conversion, and then he said, he couldn't get away from shellfish, so he decided that it's better being a Noahide. I said, it's no problem. You don't have an obligation to convert. Shellfish is okay. No problem for a Noahide. It's only by a Jew that it's an issue.
Right. Good point. So tonight we're kicking off a brand new series. This has been a long time waiting. Maybe it was a good thing because it just allowed the ad to kind of stay surfaced a little bit longer before we got kicked off. So is this is
things are much better when people have to wait. It's coming next week. No, next week. Kind of like the movie Airplane, Gate 59, Gate 60, Gate 150. No, we're getting there, right?
Right. That's funny. So this series, controversial issues, we're going to be covering pretty much anything controversial as far as things goes. And Rabbi Chaim Coffman is the little explosive stick of dynamite that's going to be responsible for delivering all of this. So, we'll discuss things, and there'll be some of these topics we'll talk about you may not even want to watch, for whatever uncomfortable reasons you may have. But we are going to talk about things like tonight, for example, we're going to talk about heterosexual marriages. That's politically way correct of saying, homosexuality per se. We'll be talking about so many things. I mean, even there's people asking, hey, are all Jewish men supposed to wear beards? And people actually get pretty offended at that whenever you lean one way or the other on that. I'm like, wow. I mean, but there are questions that people really want to know. So we've got a list of things, but we're only going to be able to cover probably one, maybe just one per night. I'm not really sure. It depends on how in depth it gets. So
depends how winded I am.
Yeah, right, right. So tonight we'll get this kicked off, and tonight's hot topic. It really is a hot topic. Is of course homosexuality in the Tanakh, and because there's so many different things that are trying to be ingrained into what is acceptable, even in Judaism. Now, granted, Orthodox Judaism doesn't consider that Judaism, but the ones doing it who are Jewish consider it Judaism. So, like for example, the conservative and not conservative necessarily, but reform movement in Judaism has fully embraced homosexual marriages. For the most part. And I think I've actually heard, Rabbi, and you could correct me on this, but I do believe that a pretty large handful of the conservatives have also or are beginning to accept this thought.
Yeah, that's 100%. That's not anything new. It's been for a while. There is actually, you want to talk about controversy, there's a group that's called Open Orthodoxy, and Open Orthodoxy is, I don't know, somewhere to the right of conservatives, somewhere to the left of modern Orthodoxy, and they're also seemingly embracing it as well, which is a major issue because they call themselves Orthodox. I mean, there are a number of issues with them. We can even speak about that one day as well. But someone will say, well, if they're really Orthodox and the Torah, as we're going to see, says that it's totally forbidden, then how can they give it legitimacy? Right? That is a major, it's a major problem. So, that group in and of itself is dangerous because they give themselves off as being legitimate. And, if you're going to back something, that's not, or you're going to say that, that Abraham, missed the boat on the Akedah, on the binding of Isaac, and God failed it, or whatever, and you're going to, mention things like that are not only controversial, but pretty much against Torah, you have to wonder exactly how Orthodox they are, but they are making inroads, in Orthodox synagogues across the country. So that's even more dangerous because they're going to claim, and others say, well, they're Orthodox, aren't they? Good question.
Right.
Just because you call yourself something, doesn't mean you are. And if you wear a big hat and a long coat, that doesn't mean anything either. So
It's just like it's just like you have a lot of these people who claim to be Jewish, are Jewish, but who have claimed to been raised in a very religious household as a Jew, and then they found Jesus, sort of thing. But then when you go to research these people and you go look them up and find out what their past was like, they weren't religious at all. They were secular, or they may have have gone to a yeshiva, but they don't study the prophets in yeshiva. They just study Torah and halakha, so to speak. So it's like, just because a person claims that they are this, just like so many people out there claim to be teachers, who really have no smicha or no reason for people following, other than having a bunch of followers on Facebook, so to speak. And so the same exact issue
that's another hot topic as well. What makes someone a rabbi, right? What makes them authentic? That we could go on for weeks.
Right, absolutely. So and so here we are now. We've got this whole homosexual idea is becoming more and more acceptable to people who are trying to find God, because of these reform movements and the conservative movements who are putting their stamp of approval on it. They say, well, if they approve it and I'm just a Noahide, then how much more is it okay for me than it would be them, because they're Jewish and I'm not. So with that said, the first step we want to cross over is discussing the Noahide view in the Tanakh, the halakha for the Noahide, regarding forbidden relationships. Could you go there for us just for a little bit?
Yeah. So for a Noahide, the Rambam Maimonides clarifies from the Talmud that there are forbidden relationships for a non-Jew as well, and homosexuality is one of them. So it applies across the board. Homosexuality, bestiality, also. Now keep in mind, a Noahide has to keep anything that's universal that makes sense. Now, if you look in the Torah in Parshas Kedoshim, chapter 20, from all these decrees that are made about who a person's not allowed to be with, right? What forbidden relationship? If you look at those forbidden relationships, it makes sense why they should be forbidden. I mean, why should a father sleep with his daughter-in-law? That's probably not going to be so good for his son. Imagine, family get-togethers. It probably could be uncomfortable. I mean, any of these forbidden, relationships, there's a purpose. There's a definite purpose why they should be forbidden, even though the Torah doesn't tell you why. When it comes to homosexuality, we'll speak more, in depth, but in homosexuality, it's called a toeva. It's called an abomination, right? But it doesn't say why. It just says it's forbidden, right? When you get to forbidden relationships, also doesn't say why it should be forbidden. But if you look at the Ten Commandments, last of the Ten Commandments is don't covet, right? Or don't covet your friend's wife. And then we go into detail, who that applies to, right? What these forbidden relationships are. So, in the secular world, it would make a whole lot of sense why you should only be with your wife and nobody else. But then the question is, what about same sex? Is that an issue, or it's not an issue? Now, in the bigger scheme of things, what's gone on, over the last 6 months, which is, why we should have done this a while ago, since it was very hot, but now we'll make it even hotter.
Well, at least it won't. At least it won't seem like we're being hateful, like we're creating hate videos about it.
No.
It's had time to.
We're trying to clarify issues that are major issues. I mean, when the Supreme Court, which has no jurisdiction whatsoever, I mean, there is a separation of church and state. Right? As far as I understand, the fact that the Supreme Court gets involved, and says every state has to recognize, it's almost like what goes on here in Israel, where the Supreme Court sticks its nose in things that they have no knowledge about whatsoever, but they feel they have the right to do, to do things. So what gives them the right to say we're going to decide, what's right, what's not right? I mean, if you remember years ago, years ago when President Bush, meaning President Bush Sr., his Secretary of State, Dan Quayle, one of the greatest things he said when he first came into office was, I'm going to go to Latin America and I'm going to brush up on my Latin. So, everyone thought he was like an absolute idiot. But one of the things he did that was actually good was he came out against the TV show Murphy Brown. Now, he came out against this TV show because she had a child out of wedlock. Now, that was how many years ago? That was a lot of years ago. And he got a lot of flack, a tremendous amount of flack, for what he did because there was an agenda out there. And the agenda is, okay, it's her decision. She wants to have a child out of wedlock. That's her right. And, first of all, who's the government, to meddle and say things and, we have free choice, we have free will, we can do whatever we want, but at the end of the day, and this is what the bigger issue is that they have an agenda. They want to tell you beyond the shadow of a doubt that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and it's a natural inclination. Now, if you look at the Torah, it's not a natural inclination. Right? The Torah, if you want to, we'll just look at it now. The Torah says in Leviticus chapter 20, in Parshas Kedoshim, verse 13, chapter 20, verse 13, the book of Leviticus, it says, a man who lies with a man is one who lies with a woman. They have both done an abomination. They should be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves. Now, whoever enacts in it is liable for the death penalty. What's the death penalty? It's the most stringent death penalty that we have if there would be corporal punishment, if there would be a Sanhedrin today, and that is skila, death by stoning. Right? Does that ring a bell? Anything, are there anything else that's forbidden by death by stoning? How about if you transgress the laws of Shabbos?
Right.
If you were warned and say, hey, if you had two witnesses and they say, hey, don't do this category of work on the Sabbath, the guy says, who cares? Go ahead, make my day. So what happens? They kill him. They stone him. They take him to a 3-story building, throw him off the building, aim for his head. If he doesn't die, they take a huge rock and aim for his heart. You know what they say? If the left one doesn't get you, the right one will. So in this case, homosexuality, right, is forbidden. Not only is it forbidden, but they're liable for the death penalty, the most stringent death penalty that there is. Now, if we look at the verse itself, the Torah here tells us that it's an abomination. They have both done an abomination. Now, it doesn't mean they themselves are an abomination. It means the act itself is an abomination. Now, we could say, someone enacting in that, or someone who doesn't keep Shabbos or any of the mitzvahs, they're called the Rasha. They're called someone that is evil, right? Because they are actively, or even if they don't know anything, it's still considered a rebellion against God.
Isn't that how the logic they're using is to try to use, people who break Shabbat are just as guilty as people who commit homosexuality? And I'm thinking, where's the connection? First of all, my thought on that issue, Rabbi, is that one who violates Shabbat in the general sense of terms versus one who chooses a lifestyle there is a difference, Yeah,
but keep in mind, the Talmud says, someone who desecrates Shabbos, who doesn't keep Shabbos, as if they deny God created the world. It's if they've denied all the mitzvahs altogether. That's pretty severe.
Right.
When you make Kiddush Friday night, the first paragraph you say is Genesis chapter 2, right? When we speak about the creation of Shabbos. So you're recreating that in a certain sense. So when you say that, when you stand up and you make Kiddush, why do you stand? Because you're giving testimony. Right? How do you give testimony? You normally stand. So here you're giving testimony that God created the world. Now, if you don't keep Shabbos, right, you're denying that. You're denying God's dominion over the world. So if you deny God's dominion over the world, as if you take the entire Torah and you spit on it. That's what it is.
Right.
That's exactly what you're doing. Again, doesn't matter what your intention is. Doesn't matter if you don't know anything. And someone who desecrates Shabbos, a Jew desecrates Shabbos, even if they don't know anything, they have the status of a non-Jew for a number of things. right? We can speak about that topic also. They lose their status as a Jew for a number of different things. It's severe because it's a main tenet of Judaism. So if it's a main tenet, you can say, well, they don't really know anything, it's not their fault, but at the end of the day, do they desecrate Shabbos or not? So Shabbos is severe, extremely severe, because you deny the whole Torah. So you're going to ask, good question, what's the connection? Shabbos is that severe. What's the problem with homosexuality? Why should it be, why should it be so severe? So that question can be easily answered by, let's look at what's gone on in the last 6 months. In the last 6 months, there's been an unbelievable agenda, put out there in order that people should say this is normal. Not only that, that if you deny somebody getting a marriage license, right, like that woman did, and she got all kinds of flack for it. Some people supported her, right? But how can you deny that? They have free will. They're making this decision. This is your job. So you're a clerk in the office. So they'll tell you, file it. That's your job. Do it. Right? But if you don't believe in it, they're telling you that's an agenda. That's a tremendous thing. I have to put my stamp of approval on something that the Torah says is an abomination, and you might have to lose your job. That's the whole question.
Right.
If a person, even as a Noahide, if they were put in that situation, they say, listen, either you put this through or you lose your job. What do? It's a good question. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a good question. Probably for, certainly for a Jew, that would be something, probably a moral issue, that they would have to stand up for Torah and say, listen, I can't be a party to this. I can't put my name on it. That's why if you say an Orthodox Jew says, well, we can support it, they're lying. Like those old Isuzu commercials. He's lying, right? You can't say that. It's an oxymoron. Like military intelligence. How can you say such a thing? How can you be an Orthodox Jew? You have an explicit verse that says it's forbidden, right?
Right.
Now let's take it one step further. What are they trying to do? They're trying to say 100% that it is normal, right? But if you go back to the book of Genesis, when God creates man, right? God creates woman. You look at Genesis chapter 2, the end of chapter 2, right? Verse 23 and 24. It says that the man said, this time is the bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. This shall be called woman. From man she was taken. Oh, was she taken? Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh.
Right.
Now, what does that tell you? That tells you, if you're married, you cling to your wife. Not someone else's wife, not your daughter-in-law, not some animal walking by the way, your wife.
Yep.
So now we have a further clarification. What does that mean? So the Torah in Leviticus that we quoted clarifies that. And the Torah says you're not allowed to engage, not in homosexuality, not in bestiality, you're not allowed to be with your daughter-in-law, you're not allowed to be with your aunt. All these different things are forbidden. Right? So now you have to ask the question, okay, why? What is the purpose, in this whole thing? So if you go back to the original verse in Genesis, the purpose is that you want to keep the institute of marriage sacred. If you don't keep it sacred, there's an effect, a trickling effect that can destroy the way society is. Let's make a more practical issue. And I think this is really the crux of it, and that is that if the Torah says this is not a good idea, right? The Torah says it's an abomination, don't do it. We want men and women to be together. We want them to have children. Oh, children! What a great idea. If this was supposed to be the norm, and this was the ideal, that all men would do this, let's ask the $1 million question. What will happen in the next generation? Or what will the next generation look like?
Mm-hmm.
You have many countries that have, that have less than population growth, right? The population growth is like minimal or negative. So what happens? You're gonna be in big trouble in years to come. You're not gonna have people. In Russia you have that. Other places in Europe you're gonna have that. So you're not gonna have a population. So who's gonna, do what we need to do in this world in order for the world to survive? If we would go according to this logic, then any man that's with man, and if every single man did it, if every single man did it, what would the next generation look like?
There wouldn't be one, yeah.
There wouldn't be.
Right.
That's right. No next generation. Well, that's bad. So they'll explain it's anyone who wants to go according to that nature, to that part of his nature. But you know what? The Torah doesn't say that. It's not, it's not a fourth definition. It's not an eighth definition. The Torah says you're not allowed to do it, period. Now, you could say, let's look at the commentaries. Do the commentaries say only for that generation? Do the commentaries say it only applies to people of that persuasion, which we're going to discuss in a second? Who does that apply to? Torah's pretty clear. Many of the commentaries don't say anything because it's pretty clear. Why it's forbidden. So now the question. So according to that, the next generation does not exist. Well, that would be bad for the way God created the world, right? If God creates the world and says, I want you to be fruitful and multiply, in this case, you cannot be fruitful and multiply. I have not found anyone. Maybe they'll discover it, in future generations. But I haven't found anyone. You have two men that mate, you're going to have a child. Well, except for that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. But be that as it may, you're not going to have that.
Right.
It doesn't work. It's biology 101 or 101.5, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't work. If it doesn't work, there is no next generation. You have to agree that's bad. No one's going to be around. So how is mankind going to survive? Right? So that's a practical issue. Obviously, God must have thought it out because in Genesis he says, cling to your wife. Husband and wife should be married, right? We see that later. But you're going to have male and female children, usually.
It's interesting too. You can't go to the hardware store and buy a water hose that's got two male fittings or two female fittings. You can't buy an extension cord with two female fittings or two male fittings. It literally it completely defies everything in nature.
Right.
So, okay, let me shift the questions a little bit now. There was a question sent in anonymously. I'll use myself as the subject. Let's say that I have children, okay, and one or both or all 50, whatever. Just let's say both of my children are turned out to be homosexual in their choices. How am I to deal with that the proper way as a Noahide? Let's throw it out there too. How should I accept my child and their spouse and actually just embrace what they're doing, or do I cut myself off from them, or do I find somewhere to meet in the middle? What does Judaism teach on that?
It's a good question. It's probably similar to what happens. Let's say a person intermarries, right? A Jew intermarries with a non-Jew.
Okay.
How do you deal with that as well? So. Within Judaism, you got to be careful. You got to be careful because if there are other children, and they're going in the right path, and the Torah says it's forbidden, you have to send the message, right? You can say, listen, I don't approve. You can make it clear that you don't approve. Now you might say, well, what happens if they say, well, you don't approve of what I do? And you're not tolerant, like, adios. So, I know people who have definitely done that when it comes to intermarriage. They told their parents, listen, you didn't do anything to stop it. And we don't believe in most things anyway, so you have to accept it. If you don't accept it, you'll never see my grandkid.
Right. So
and that is a serious threat. And I know many people, they'll say, oh, you're a fanatic and you're this and you're that, but this is the reality. Yeah, that is the reality, but don't be a wuss. My language. Don't be a wuss just because it's a reality. Just because it's a reality, you have to condone it. Where the Torah says 12 times, don't intermarry. Say, no, it doesn't apply to you. We're going to accept you anyway. Are you allowed, in Europe, if somebody intermarried, they sat Shiva for 2 weeks. Right? They mourned for 2 weeks. They'll say, oh, Europe was a different generation and they were fanatics. Isn't that the right thing to do? You've cut yourself off spiritually from the Jewish people. Right? In this case, so if you have kids that are homosexual, so there's no way a person can condone it. You can tell them, you have the choice. You can say, listen, I definitely don't approve, and I don't want it in my house.
Okay, pause right there. Because that is really taking it home right there. And you can continue, but I want to kind of really put the microscope on now. So, what is it that marks whether I'm condoning it or not? If I say, if I just tell them, for example, I do not approve of your relationship, period, at all. I can't stand for it. I love you. Come over for dinner with your spouse. No. So that's a contradiction. That's what I want to find out. You can't say, well, I think it's forbidden, but we're going to include you. Right. You can't do it. I mean, that's an impossibility. You have to say, listen, I love you. You're my child. I'm here for you, but I can't allow that in my house. And then you put it in their court, the ball in their court, because they're the ones making the choice. What if they say, okay, fine, we'll invite you. You come over to our house. Can I go? I wouldn't. I wouldn't either. I'm just using that as a hypothetical term. I mean, again, if it's something like that, or something that's, let's say intermarriage, how can a person go? How can a person go? Because what you're doing is you're saying it's okay. Right. So I had somebody that once told me they went to their sister got married to a non-Jew, and he told me that he went to the ceremony and he went to the wedding under protest. So I said, under protest when you were stuffing your face at the meal? I go, how much under protest? When you were dancing with the bride? Like, how much under protest did you go? Okay, so here's another scenario. You've got, let's say my daughter had started off right. She got married. They had a child. And then after that, she turned and decided to follow the other lifestyle where they have a grandchild, a biological one, because a minute ago I was thinking about what if they adopted. Well, that adopted grandchild really isn't yours anyway. But if you do have a biological, and then they start threatening you with this thing, the thing that comes to my mind is it's got to be hurtful and tearing the family apart, but you really have to choose who you're going to serve. Like Joshua, and it's like... So the Rambam, in the first of the 13 principles of faith, Maimonides says that God is absolute. What that means is that he doesn't change. There's no moral relativism. What he says goes, and he can punish and do other things. And the Rambam, makes clear that either you serve God or you serve idols. There's nothing in between. You can't jump on both bandwagons. Interesting. So idolatry doesn't just mean bowing down to a guy on a stick or a short little fat guy or, whatever it is. It could be anything. It could be wealth. It could be money. It could be, entertainment. It could be sports. It could be fame, right? It could be fame, whatever it is that a person puts all their stock in this world, because it sure ain't God. So a person has to, and it's a painful thing, and it's a painful choice. But at the end of the day, if a person says, yes, I serve God, and I do what God wants me to do, whether it's a Jew or a Noahide, the question is, do you live up to the ideal, or do you cave into pressure? Right. And it's a very difficult thing. I've gone through it myself, but at the end of the day, you got to make a stand. Right. And you got to make a choice to say, but
what if they're going to do X? What if? Who cares what if? Does the Torah say it's forbidden or not?
Mm-hmm. And it's
and
forbidden.
If it says it's forbidden,
yeah.
What can you do? You know, one of the famous statements that I'm going to try and patent is you cannot turn the Torah into a pretzel. The Torah itself, you can't just do whatever you want. You feel like doing it, you don't feel like doing it. If the Torah says it's forbidden, and in this case the Torah says it's an abomination, how can I have them in my house?
Mm-hmm. And this would answer your question too, if you're curious. Well, what if we're not related and it's just friends? What if I'm trying to, shine the light of Torah and I found out they're gay? Well, can I still invite them over if we're having a Bible study?
That's something else. If they want to learn and they're interested in learning, there's a whole question what to do. Should you totally push them away? Or should you try and, bring them closer? Now, it has been shown that someone in such a relationship, as difficult as it might be to get out of it, it has been shown that they can be helped. Now, if someone comes and they say they want to learn, right, you're not saying what they do is right. Right? You're not condoning it by any way, shape, or form. I've heard stories in this open Orthodox movement that, these people have been welcomed into synagogue, given, paying membership, etc. That I don't know how you can allow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a much bigger, that's a much bigger problem. If they want to come and they want to learn, I don't know if there's anything, I don't know if there's anything necessarily wrong with it. You are trying to draw them, close. There is a difference though. There is a difference by making them, upstanding members of your synagogue.
Right.
You have to take, at some point you have to take a stand. Teaching and people want to learn, we can be, we can be a little more open-minded, with that. I mean, you're going to let someone who's a pedophile learn if he wants to learn? Yeah, I mean, where do you draw the line?
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's a rapist, someone who transgresses Shabbos. I mean, if you didn't deal with people that transgress Shabbos, you'd never be able to reach them.
Right.
So it is a fine line, especially if it's your own kid.
And I think if you come across that scenario where the kid or the friend is expressing, I want to learn, there's really going to have to be some genuine proof of that. In my opinion, you would think, okay, maybe they're struggling with homosexuality and they're trying to avoid it. They come over to your house and, no, Dad, I'm just here. I just want to, whatever the case may be, I want to just visit with you guys. I understand you guys don't accept it. That I left my mate at home because I'm trying my best to get out of this situation. Then I guess that would probably be more acceptable.
That's something else. But again, if he wants to come, you let him come on your terms,
right?
Not on his.
Okay.
In other words, you tell him you want to come. The door is open. You leave your buddy at home.
Right.
He's not coming.
Right.
I made that decision years ago. It wasn't popular. It wasn't homosexual. I was more with intermarriage. But, it wasn't popular. We stood our ground. That's it. You want to come? You're more than welcome. Your spouse, he stays home.
Right.
They were offended, but I said, I'm not letting this into my house.
Right.
The Torah says when it comes to idolatry, for instance, maybe a bad thing to say here, but, when it speaks about idolatry, it says don't bring it into your house. Now, this isn't necessarily idolatry, but what you're doing is you let them into your house, you're saying it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I got advice from my rabbis that, you nip it at the bud. You want to come, you come by yourself. And they were totally offended. But, we're not into, and we're going to see by these controversial topics, we're not into being politically correct.
Right,
the question is, what does the Torah obligate me to do or not? There is a lot of gray area. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you got to stand firm.
Yeah.
You can't be wishy-washy. If you're going to stand by something, do it 100%. Be consistent. But if you're going to be wishy-washy, you're finished. Because then they're going to say, well, you used to do this, and now you don't do it. But now you do it again. So, people are going to see that it's you wishy-washy. You're not standing, you're not standing your own, you're not standing your own ground. and that people will absolutely hammer you about, and they're right, because at the end of the day, you are flip-flopping, and
sure.
And it's no one should ever be in such a position. It's a very hard position to be in, especially when it comes to family. But at the end of the day, either the Torah is true or it's not true. And if it's true, what are my obligations? Right? So, again, you want to be part of something that in the history of creation will be an absolute disaster, and the world won't exist. Say, sure, come into my home. Sure, come, I'll be as open-minded until my brains fall on the floor. What a great thing.
Right.
How can you do that? Again, people will say things to you. People will give you a hard time. They'll make fun of you. They'll say things. So you have to have, nerves of steel and thick skin. Because if not, they will destroy you.
That's true.
Another thing which is, I want to bring up, which is problematic with this whole thing, is that they're claiming that this is a legitimate lifestyle. And they're claiming that it's normal. It's a normal desire. Now the Torah says it's not a normal desire, because a man should be with a woman. Now, what happens if someone says, I have a certain affinity towards this? I have a desire. People have all kinds of desires. You think once a person gets married, he doesn't have a desire to be with another woman? I'll tell people that, they'll also say, well, they're trying to prove that homosexuality is genetic. Now, let's say, and I had an argument with a doctor years ago, and he wanted to say it's genetic. So I said, let's say it is genetic. Now, genetically, I'm a night person, right? As you can know, or I don't need that much sleep.
Yeah.
I can go to sleep late at night, and I can wake up early. But let's say genetically, I like to stay up late at night. So early in the morning, God says, I don't care if you like to stay up at night. You have to get up and pray when you need to. I don't care if you're tired. I don't care if you're doing this, this show at, some god-awful hour in the middle of the night. You have to get up and you have to go pray. But you see, but genetically, I have this other thing. God says, I don't care what you have.
You have to
genetically.
choose otherwise.
Right?
Yeah.
Genetically, if I eat a lot of matzah on Passover, it's going to ruin my insides. God says, I don't care, eat the stupid matzah. 4 pounds in 35 seconds and whistle Dixie. I'm not interested. And start whistling Dixie afterwards. My kids always have a good time because they don't know what Dixie is. But I
can just picture them whistling with a mouthful of matzah.
Like peanut butter taste, like they can't even say anything. But the point is that I can prove anything. Any bad character trait is genetic. Person gets angry, I have a genetic gene.
Yeah, right.
You're disposed to that, right? You have more of an affinity. Listen, I grew up in a family of the mafia. My father was a mafioso, his father was a mafioso. Doesn't it mean, and doesn't it show I probably have an affinity towards that? Yeah, but who says you have to be a mafioso? And if you kill people, you could go to jail. Well, what do you want? We're not into Freud today. And Freud would say, well, his father was that, and his father was that, so you can't hold it against him. That's not true. Judaism doesn't believe in that. So if you act on a bad desire, and you can fill in the blank whatever that bad desire is, whatever that bad character trait is, am I going to be liable if I do it, whether I have more of an affinity to do it or not? Of course I'm going to be liable. God put it in your DNA, right? If a person has, let's say, an anger problem, right, we have what to work on. But you can say, well, God put it as part of my DNA. What can I do? Well, what do you want me to do? It's part of my DNA. Well, God says, I don't care if I put it as part of your DNA. Yeah. I want you to work on it.
Right. The thought comes to mind, too. I saw something on the news last week or the week before last. A parent was interviewed on the news because she was trying to aid her child in cross-dressing. And because she said, well, I want my child to be independent and to be who this child feels that he or she is. And somebody asked me that question a couple months ago and said, what if I see my kid is drawn to the opposite sex in his approach to life? And I said, well, you're the parent. You're the one that's supposed to teach this child which way to go. And as long as that child is living in your house, you should never allow that type of behavior. Don't ever let your child cross-dress. I mean, unless it's Purim, of course. But as a general rule of thumb, you as the parent are supposed to teach them the proper behavior. And if you don't, anything that goes unchecked will only grow. So for a parent to say,
that's also true. A parent has to educate their kid. In this day and age, it's extremely difficult because the power of the street is so strong.
Sure.
And what people do. Someone who doesn't educate, someone who doesn't punish, the King Solomon in Proverbs says that, you spare the rod, you're considered cruel.
9 times.
Doesn't mean you beat your kid to death, but you have to educate.
Right.
So you have to set up values. Now, it doesn't mean your kid's going to go in those values, and there's no guarantee. Right. Torah's not an inheritance. That's true, but if I say, well, do whatever you want, do what your friends are doing, and whatever, you're negligent. You're totally negligent.
Yeah. And then you're liable. I mean, if you teach the child and the child still goes off on his way, then you did your job, No,
you're still good. At the end of the day, though, it's much deeper than that because if you have an obligation to educate your child and he goes off and doesn't do what he's supposed to do, you're also liable.
Really?
Now, it doesn't matter why it happens. Bad influence in school, whatever. It looks bad upon the parent. Even if the parent comes from an illustrious family, something went awry, went astray, and he's going to be liable as well.
Interesting. So, when you say liable, liable, explain that. Like the parent is. How does God view that?
In other words, one aspect of it is that the Torah says that a son pays for the sins of the parent. Right? What does that mean? It means that if a parent has bad qualities, bad character traits, and the son or the child goes in that direction, then there's a curse. If the son breaks out of it, they don't follow in the parent's footsteps. That doesn't apply. Now a parent has an obligation to educate their child. If their child, at the end of the day, goes off and doesn't want anything, to do with Judaism, then the parent themselves, after 120 years, they're going to get, there's going to be a certain punishment for that as well, even though they have free will. Even though once they're past the age of bar mitzvah, they make the choice of which way to go, of what they're going to do, and they're liable for their choices, but you're also liable. You're liable to help them. If they go off, they go off. Right? But at the same time, it's considered transgression for you as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So what do you? So in regarding Torah, whenever a child is gone astray, because you hear stories not only in the Torah but also in the Midrash where a prophet had a child and his child turned out to be really wicked. Does that mean that that prophet was held accountable for that child not turning out right?
An example. There's a story with
Eli.
With I'll think of it in a second. That didn't want to have children. For the reason that he saw in the future.
Oh yeah, that was with Isaiah.
With Isaiah, right? With Hezekiah, with Hezekiah, that he didn't want to have children because he saw in the future that he was going to have a wicked child, and angel came and said you're liable for death because you're not married, you're not doing anything for procreation. So he said that I see in the future that this is going to be, and he said, it doesn't matter. You have to do what you have to do, and you do your best to educate your child. Whatever happens, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have children.
That's a really good point too.
And he was held liable for that almost that the angel came and killed him.
Okay, now the part of the Midrash also doesn't say that Isaiah and Hezekiah, they're basically daughter and sons. Hey, I'm a righteous guy. You're a good guy. They get married, and the kid still turned out wicked.
Right. There's no. So again, the Torah is not an inheritance.
Right.
So that means that Should I be worried that a kid is going to turn out however they're going to turn out, and therefore not have children ever? Yeah, you could do that, but you get an obligation to have children as well. So,
right.
You know what they say: if the right hand doesn't get you, the left one will. So, what are you going to do? Stick your head in the sand? Like, you have to put your best foot forward, and you have to pray a lot.
So, what do you say to the parent who does have a homosexual child, and they did their best to try to steer them away the entire time they were at home, but they still went on that way? What would you say to that parent?
Nothing to say. There's, it's tragic. Whatever you should try to the best of your ability, not to throw them out, but, to still have a connection, because, the power of repentance, is very strong. God has a tremendous amount of compassion, and the power of prayer never goes unanswered, right? It might not go answered for you, but, power of prayer is still very strong. So, in that sense, you never give up hope. You absolutely never, you never give up hope. And if what you do, the child says, well, you're not going to accept, who I'm with, and they walk out the door and they say, I'm never coming back, that's tragic. Doesn't mean you still can't pray or whatever, but, again, you have to set the bar somewhere. You can tell them, I love you, you're my child, I'm here for you. But just don't bring this guy in.
Right.
Just don't bring him into I cannot have him in my house. And if he makes that choice, and he says, I'm out of here, there's not much you can do. That's why we never throw anybody out. Unless their influence is so bad in the house that they're causing, others to go astray, then you might not have a choice. But
sure.
You have to ask, someone very, very big, in order what to do in such a situation, because
if you don't have a rabbi, find one. Find somebody who doesn't mind taking some time and talking with you, and follow the
Well, you don't have that much time. That's a much bigger topic. But that's what we have, our big rabbis for, to deal with these. To deal with these issues, try and find someone local if they can't deal with it. You got to go to someone big. You can't, it's a monumental decision, to do such a thing. I'll give an example. Just one example. Most people don't know that Leonid Trotsky, was a yeshiva student.
Okay.
And because of what he was doing, they threw him out of the yeshiva. And we know what he went on to do. I mean, how many people, thousands, millions of people, were killed, sent to Siberia, and just lost to communism. So the Chofetz Chaim said, had they kept him in school and not thrown him out, world history will look different.
Right. He may have came out.
Now again, that's a very hard thing to do also, if he's having bad influence. Where do you draw the line? We're not going.
But then again, now see, that's kind of where I'm thinking. If we follow the same logic of like having a child, let's say I had a dream that my child was going to turn out wicked, so I don't want to have a child. Well, okay, so now but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have a child. You should have the child anyway, right? So like if you're if you're leading a yeshiva and you find out one of your students is gay, and you think to yourself, well, I don't want to throw him out, because if I throw him out, who knows? He might actually come to the light by staying in here. But if the rule is to not tolerate it, then you need to let him go and actually let God take care of whether he returns or not.
It depends what it is. In the case with Trotsky and other people that have been thrown out, someone's doing drugs, that's bad. If they're influencing people to do bad things, you have to nip it in the bud.
Right.
Otherwise, you could have a whole catastrophe. And that again, you need very, very broad shoulders in order to know when to do, when not to do. I just brought up the example of Trotsky because look what he became.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the damage. Look at the damage that he did. I mean, millions of people lost to communism. Millions of people killed. And so the Chofetz Chaim said, had they tried to bring him closer and not, and done whatever they could not to throw him out, world history would probably look different.
Yeah, sure enough. Unbelievable. Well, that's kind of wrapping us up. Y'all definitely tune in to the future episodes. I'm not sure if we're going to pull off Wednesdays every week. It seems to be quite the schedule feat for me to accomplish. But we may push it at another time at a very irate hour. So if you're not up, don't worry. You can always, like Rabbi woke up at 3 o'clock so he could sit here at 4 a.m. with me from Israel. But you can always watch the videos in the YouTube channel archives.
Can I do that also? In other words, I could just...
You could just show up later.
I can show up later and say, oh, look, I missed it. There's nothing there.
Oh, my gosh. You're as crazy as you look. That is so funny.
And then you're going to ask when bad things happen to good people. Come on.
Well, I'll tell you what, it has been fun. Rabbi, thank you so much. Stay tuned. Subscribe to the YouTube events page if you want to see the events come up as I create them. And we'll let you know soon what the next title is. If you have any ideas for titles for this show, send me an email, tanaktalkquestions@gmail.com, and just send it there and say, for controversial issues, and then semicolon, tell me what the topic is, and we'll run it by Rabbi, and we'll see how we can approach it, okay? So, Rabbi, thank you again. It's been way too long, and hopefully it won't be that long again before I can get you in here, but as long as you promise to not blow up my system, we'll be okay.
Look, we worked well tonight. Unbelievable.
Oh,
everything battened down.
All right, shalom, Rabbi. Shalom, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone have a great week.
איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה